the word normal is disappearing and will have disappeared totally, in my opinion, due to a nuclear exchange. The country we know that we have loved and that so many people fought and died for no longer exists. Today, just across the world, people saw the most horrific demonstration of, I would call, a political meltdown of a socialist/communist undertaking in just Kavanaugh, the gentleman, Judge Kavanaugh, who's being, if you will, grilled and drilled by the Senate. What we saw is, in my opinion, the total demonic manifestation of absolute crazy people. And, Michael Savage makes a statement that liberalism is a mental disorder.
Yes.
I don't think anybody can challenge that. But what we're seeing tonight, let's talk about what's going on in Syria, because, I'm sure it's going to sound like a pun, but it doesn't get any more serious than what's going on right now. The United States, the UK, and France all know that Assad has won the civil war because of the Russians' backing, and the French ambassador even publicly admitted it. But now you've got I said years ago, Dave, and I think I've said it on your show 3 or 4 years ago, we're going to be in the period of double crossing, triple crossing, and quadruple crossing of everyone's interest. And as it's been said by someone else before, that there are no markets, only manipulations, and nothing happens by chance. Everything is being orchestrated, scripted by the New World Order proponents. And what we're seeing right now is, in my opinion, the setup for a global conflagration. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I can tell you this, there's never been a Russian, if you will, a Sino-Russian joint military maneuver with so much happening and so many assets, both ships, aircraft, men, and all the positioning, not only in the Middle East, but moving onto Russia's western front. It's like someone decided to stir the global pot up totally. And even now, the weather that has turned completely, and I will say this, I believe in man-made global warming. It's called manipulation, geoengineering. It's called weather wars. It's called the Air Force document, the weather as a force multiplier. And by the way, that came out almost a decade ago. In other words, we own the weather 2025 was the title of it. But got news for you, they've owned it for the past decade, or at least 2.5 decades. So now we've got, if you will, an overwhelming series of events happening throughout the world. And I believe, too, what we're seeing, Dave, is AI, artificial intelligence, but I call it antichrist intelligence, working in all realms. Now, remember this. You and I, even as humans, as marvelous as God created our brains to be, we cannot do what the supercomputers can do in an instant. Remember when we talked about China being able to identify anybody in China within, a second, and we're talking about billions of faces, or at least 1.5 billion faces. Now I want to make everybody to understand something really important. Today it came out that the Freedom of Information Act, all those requests, every single Freedom of Information Act request that has been filed has been, breached and released. There are no databases that exist that have not been breached and released. Now, why is that important? Because FOIA, or FOIA requests, will be considered enemies of the state. And what's problematic to me is, even as we're on the radio tonight, Dave, and the events transpiring in the Middle East, in Europe, and I want to make this clear, you're seeing the end of NATO has already happened, okay? People, when I make statements like that, you'd think that they just basically left the Democratic Party and went directly to the insane asylums because they screamed so loudly. That's not true. That's not true. But when you've got the French ambassador, even today, publicly admitting, that Assad has won the civil war, when you see Germany's statement that they're going to basically, with France and other European nations, i.e., and I'll say this, that they've already made their secret deals with Russia. Yeah, I'm going to say that one more time. NATO is done, ladies and gentlemen. That's not a negative statement. It is not a Russian intel or COINTELPRO, in other words, counterintelligence. That's just a statement, because basically, Russia and China have been the largest purchasers of gold bullion. Let me explain what's happening in the gold market, and this will explain why gold and silver are down now, but all of the commercials, which you can't fight commercials. Those of you who have been professional traders, gold and silver traders, I used to do it until basically I had my financial head handed to me on a platter. One day you can think you're a genius, next minute you've lost twice what you thought you made when you thought you're a genius. Then you come to realize the market's bigger than any man. But the commercial traders are taking on a long position. They would only do that having not had a long position, meaning they believe gold and silver are going to go up. But before they go up, they're going to manipulate the gold and silver prices down in the futures market, and they're going to come in and buy bullion like no tomorrow. And as different people like Rob Kirby, the analyst, basically he trades in tons of gold. I know a couple other gold traders that deal in tons, and you're talking, $30 million a ton easily. And so you're talking about people that can put some serious money together. So it would be astonishing for people not to recognize the threat of an agreement between the two largest gold holders in the world right now, number one being China. By the way, when you see the official gold holdings by the World Gold Council, let me just say this, that's daydream believing. That's totally horse manure. It's believed that China has got in excess of 30,000 tons of gold. Now, I want to remind people of the history of China. You've got all the different dynasties. You've got, obviously, the reign of Kublai Khan, Genghis Khan, in that part of the world. And all of the gold, the spoil, all of the treasure, that's all been, how should I say, accumulated. And I actually talked to a gold trader who lives in Beijing, who has been in what they call, in his term for it, was a cave of treasures, and said, Steve, as far as you can see with the eye, there's gold bullion, there's gold coins, there's gold, gold, gold. So whether people like it or not, the idea simply is this: whatever new financial system is going to be brought on the scene, Dave, will, in order to have acceptance, be backed by gold, not totally gold, maybe even oil, partially backed by gold. But can you imagine what would happen if 30,000 tons of gold, which is, gold's right around $1,200 an ounce tonight, if that were all of a sudden valued at $10,000, the sheer power of that would make Russia and China the two most powerful financial forces in the world almost instantaneously. The rest of the world is revulsing at the paper dollar. The rest of the world has decided the Yankee dollars have spoiled and plundered the rest of the world, and now they're saying enough is enough. Now, when God judges a nation, he is specific in his judgment. And obviously, in the United States, the God, little g, of in God we trust on paper money is going to be a very, how do I say this, quickly incinerating idol. Because if you look at a dollar now compared to, 60 years ago, it's worth a nickel. So even a millionaire, if you divide the purchasing power, you can see that the purchasing power in dollars has gone down. But obviously, when you look at it in gold, it's going up. So the thing I'm telling people is this: you're going to see the panic into the market to acquire physical. Now, in the metals market, in the physical bullion coin business, for the last 8 months has been languishing, just absolutely languishing. But the huge money, the big money, the guys I talk to, and fortunately I know a lot of guys in this world who are in the big money world, and I'm talking in the big money world, I'm talking, nine-figure guys, and they're acquiring what they can acquire. And when you're in that world, those guys can tell you not who's doing it, but they can tell you what's going on. And that's what's important, Dave. Even at this point in your writing about the Chinese, look, we talked about that, a decade ago, and people poo-pooed us. And even I sent a truck driver, and some guys took an airplane and went down and said, yeah, they're in Mexico. So the thing is that now the idea simply is this: the United States is like a honeycomb, where we once were a solid, and I will say this, I could care less of the argument. Was America a biblical nation? The America that used to be great honored God and honored the country and honored those who fought for freedom. Freedom and liberty were still religious, if you will, expressions of obedience to the living God. Now, when Jesus said, "Get thee behind me, Satan," look at what's happened. Satanism has broken out throughout the land. The pedophilia, the blood sacrifice, the perversion that has been revealed to be in the political lives of the most powerful. Dave, I think I had a revelation I'll share with your listeners. Roe v. Wade, if you looked at, what's the name of Diane Frankenstein? Okay, I'm sorry, Feinstein. And by the way, I usually say nothing's fine with that Stein. But the point is that when she was talking, her two main issues, listen, were abortion and gun control. Ladies and gentlemen, had Roe v. Wade not happened, it is the blood of the innocents. Here's what I'm going to share, Dave, and this came to me like, no kidding, like lightning bolts, is the blood of the innocents and the slaughter of the innocent, the blood of the children, all of the satanic sacrifices, has been the lubrication, if you will, to invoke the very dark forces that are biblically described in the book of Revelation and the book of Daniel and the prophets of the great end time, if you will, four horsemen of the apocalypse. And now we've got basically lying lips bringing about the apocalypse, and what people don't really, I think, understand is the lateness of the hour. It is not going to be, in my opinion, a protracted series of events. I mean, even the Russians say this whole thing's over in an hour. And when you look at technology, when you look at hypersonic missile technology, when you look at all of the different, if you will, Tesla physics-oriented weapons, you and I have talked about this, when you talk about weapon systems that are 1,000 years into the future advance because they existed 10,000 years in the past, you find out this, that what you see basically on the Monopoly board or the game of war in a two-dimensional realm is going to enter a spiritual dimension, and this is what's happening, Dave, in my opinion. With AI, artificial intelligence, transhumanism, the hybridization of the human genome, the recreation of monsters, the reanimation of everything from dinosaurs, satyrs, unicorns. By the way, unicorns are mentioned in the Bible 9 times in the Old Testament, as is the word satyr. Those are half man in the case of satyrs and half beast. Now, it's also critical that people understand this, that the genetically specific weapons already exist. You can identify any trait of any people group, and you can generate a bioweapon and target that group without worrying about any secondary infection or any of the transmission vectors normally associated with it affecting the non-targeted group. So and here's what happens. What happens when you get reverberation, that's just a term I'm using, for everybody launching their own version, and then due to the electromagnetic attenuation of all the secret space-based weapons, all the different HARP radio antennas, all the different geoengineering, all of this stuff going on concurrently, what's going to happen to what would you say, the unintended consequences of that go way beyond the intended consequences?